Welcome to the inaugural edition of the High-Risk Tech Talk series. We hope you and your loved ones are safe, taking all the necessary precautions in these unprecedented times. This is a very, very special new initiative by highrisk.com to promote knowledge sharing sessions by industry experts on the latest and trending skills and technologies in the marketplace. Well, through this series, we hope to encourage high quality engineering and tech conversations amongst the tech leaders of today. By the way, a little bit introduction about myself. My name is Ubhoj. I'm a part of the marketing team at highrisk.com. And I'm extremely delighted to have all of you to join us on a Friday evening, right on time at 4 p.m. guys. So today we have the pleasure of launching this series in collaboration with the tech leadership at Hike. And as you all know, Hike is an Indian AI-led unicorn startup that is committed to the building of a new social future. Hike believes that the future of social will have products that are joyful and built around people, not the other way around. So Hike believes that the future of social lies around social niches and is scaling the future through the products it is building. Through Hike's Sticker Chat, for example, an expression-based platform, the company aims to take expressions beyond keyboard. In line with the company's vision of bringing new age social experiences, the company recently also launched Hikemoji, which is built at the intersection of art and AI, and it's wonderful. I've used it personally, and redefining what social means to all the Indian users. Hike recently also launched Hikeland, a virtual world enabling magical shared experiences with Hikemoji as users' virtual reality. In August 2016, guys, Hike became the 10th Indian startup to be valued at $1 million. Hike has raised since then around $261 million in capital from tier 1 organizations like SoftBank, Tiger Global, Bharti, etc. So for that reason, we have Mr. Suvesh Malhotra here with us today, who is the VP and head of engineering at Hike. He comes with an extraordinary experience, guys, of more than 15 years across various industries. He's really passionate about information technology and has kindly accepted to lead this session with us. So today he'll be sharing his insights on the topic how to become a 10x engineer. I'm sure a lot of us, all of us will resonate with this. Before we start, guys, I request you all to post all the questions that you have in the chat box. I believe you can see on the right-hand side. I'm not sure either it's on the right-hand side or the left-hand side. Suvesh sir will be taking as many questions as possible towards the end of the webinar, of course. And we've also received a very high volume of questions from you guys during the registration, and we'll try to take some of them as well. So I think without any further ado, guys, we'll get right into the topic of discussion at hand. And Suvesh is going to take this forward. So over to you, Suvesh.
Hi everyone. Thanks for joining. It's a pleasure to be here. I want to start off by thanking Highrisk for giving me this opportunity to share my experience with this tremendous group. So really looking forward to an exciting conversation today. And as Vibhor mentioned, would love to also hear more questions so that we can have an engaging conversation. Right off. So again, I'm Suvesh Malhotra, VP and Head of Engineering at Hike. I manage all of engineering at Hike. It's a short stint. I joined a couple of months back, but a lot more to do in future. I've been lucky to have had a diverse experience. Just want to share a bit about that as well. About 15 to 16 years back, I was at Oracle, where I played a key role in modeling their cloud components, solved tricky concurrency problems. From there on, I built e-commerce platforms from scratch at Home Shop 18 and various other e-commerce companies. I built warehouse management systems from scratch. I scaled them to 10 million SKUs, etc. Spent time at other startups as well. Spent few years at Amazon, where I learned to operate operational excellence and customer obsession at scale. Most recently, prior to Hike, I was at Oyo, where I scaled engineering from 15 engineers to 250 plus engineers, was managing over 300 plus microservices. So I learned a lot of scaling up of the organization at Oyo. And as I mentioned earlier, 2 months back, I joined Hike. I joined Hike because I'm personally very passionate about social, and I believe it's ripe for disruption. Hike has an amazing vision of building a new social future, building products for a brand new social future with the advancement in tech and AI, as one of the guiding principles. As part of that, we launched HighClient recently, a couple of months back, which is world's first mobile-first virtual world. Think of HighClient as a magical and safe place to hang out online, where great friendships can blossom and new friendships can form and thrive over shared experiences. We are creating a social experience that is beyond chat rooms and feeds interface, leading to more meaningful memories and moments with friends. As an example, we have home where close friends can join and watch TV together, building stronger bonds between each other. We have a product called Big Screen, it's part of HighClient, where you can watch a movie, meet new people who have similar interests, chat and make friends. And several new experiences are in pipeline. And all of this, we have to fundamentally innovate in AI, machine learning, app engineering in terms of how do you pack all of these experiences in limited memory. We have to build real-time systems because all of these are real-time experiences, right? And how do we build them for the scale at which we are operating and the scale that will continue to progress towards in future. So I'm super excited in our mission and as well as exhilarated by the complexity of problems we are solving. So yeah. So now moving to our topic, how to become a 10x engineer. It is a controversial topic. Some people say it's a myth, that 10x engineers don't exist. And it can be argued whether it's 5x, 10x or 20x, but I do believe there are engineers who are just more effective. And of course, whatever I share today is my own version, what I've learned from my experience. So it is definitely not the only way, and I don't intend it to be exhaustive as well. And by the way, I don't intend to cover specific tech frameworks or technologies. The idea is rather to cover qualities that make an engineer more effective. By the way, a lot of these things are fairly obvious, actually, but also I've learned from my experience that they're commonly misunderstood or missed altogether. Yeah. Before we jump into what makes a 10x engineer, let's just quickly look at patterns or thoughts or the myths, specifically in terms of what does not make you a 10x engineer. It's on a lighter note. Arrogant babbling, it makes you an egomaniac. Writing unreadable code. By the way, I'm guilty of it myself. I used to be proud of writing complex code that I can cram into short amount of space. And I remember this time where I had to modify it after a couple of months and I couldn't do it because I really couldn't understand it. So, that was my learning as well. So writing unreadable codes makes you actually ineffective. Unapproachable aura makes your team less effective. Using assembly language to write a web app, for sure lacking common sense. Wearing a red cape, for sure my fantasy as well, but doesn't create 10x engineers. 10x engineers don't write 10x code. They don't work 10x hours as well. They're just more effective. They generate greater outcomes and they make their teams better. Yeah, for the uninitiated, this is a comic strip of Calvin Hobbes. Calvin is a 6-year-old kid who's like any other 6-year-old kid, but very smart with words. And the tiger shown over here is Hobbes, who's a stuffed tiger, but Calvin believes him to be real. And the strip is all about Calvin Hobbes talking and sharing some of the best life advices. On all of these strips, I'll just wait for 10 seconds for you to read. But in this case, as Calvin proclaims, last minute panic. I think it works for engineering as well. I've seen greater creativity and productivity in those last minute panic movements. But for sure, we are talking about sustained 10x over here, right? So let's jump into those qualities and talk about them a bit more. Process oriented. Great engineers are process oriented. An example of a flowchart being explained via flowchart, definitely an anti-pattern, not the sort of process one should build. But I remember, I had a production issue once. This is earlier times in my engineering career. And I used to love solving production issues. So it was an intense problem. Or sort of website was down for 15 minutes. I jumped into it and resolved it. I did an RCA, and I was pretty happy. About a month later, a similar issue repeated. And that's when I realized that I actually did not do a good job at RCA because I did not identify the underlying patterns and resolved it. And that's where processes become very important. As an example, at Hike, we have built a process to do RCA production issues. We, in that process, we have specifically defined 5 whys as a structure, and we keep asking why until we get to the deeper pattern. And we log the action items after identifying those sort of deeper root causes and track them to closure. Just to give an example, a very simple example. Let's say your website was down because database disk was full. I've seen it happening, a few times in my career. And you sort of reduced disk capacity. You reduced the disk consumption and brought the site back up. But that does not solve the problem. We really need to go sort of deeper and understand why did the disk became full. Was it unexpected? If it was unexpected, what led to that? And sort of resolve that issue. We should not just do that, but ask the question as to why was there no alert if the disk was becoming full, so that we could have acted in advance. So those are things which a process enables to solve, which in the absence of process becomes a good intention. So as I said, processes are a great mechanism to scale, learn from mistakes and avoid repeating them. Obviously, when you're thinking of building a process, it's very important to think of building an MVP, like a minimum viable process, and keep it lightweight. Process should be defined as rigorously as possible. And one of the most important aspects, as I said, is to build a lightweight process. When you make the process too complex, that's when it becomes untenable. So there's a sweet spot between no process and a complex process. And that's why it's also very important to automate process as much as possible. A simple process that we have at Hike to automate these processes, because automation just increases the effectiveness of the process even more. And very important to challenge these processes. Most of the pain points of engineers are not process per se, and I've heard it times at some time, at few times, and I've faced it myself as well. But the issue really is the obsolete processes. In fast-growing startups, processes obsolete even faster. What works today may not work tomorrow. Hence, it is very, very important to constantly challenge processes. And yeah, great engineers make great processes, and there's no one else who can build such processes. Okay, slide 12.
Slide.
Yeah, next slide.
Yeah.
Okay. Great engineers are tool builders. Next. Yeah, so this is a classic challenge that we face while automating stuff, right? That is on a lighter note, but I was working for one of these e-commerce startups where we had this daily activity to upload banners on the homepage, and sort of while back, long back, and it was sort of a daily task which I had to do, and sort of I got a little bit frustrated. So I built a quick tool to make it easier to upload myself. And then I sort of opened it for the marketing team so that they can upload it themselves, which eventually became a content management system. So something which started as a simple tool that not only increased my own effectiveness, eventually became an important tool of business efficiency. So that's a key role that tools can play, and it's very important to be therefore aware of the opportunity. Next slide. Yeah. So tools reduces mistakes and supercharges productivity. And to do it, just look out for the repetitive work that you're doing yourself, repetitive work that your team is doing. Identify the patterns of common mistakes, because tools is not just for efficiency, but also to reduce errors. But always be mindful of ROI. I've seen myself going through this rat hole of building a complex framework once which did not have a lot of value. So be mindful of the ROI. And yeah, great engineers build great tools. Next slide. Structured thinker. Great engineers are structured thinkers. Effective engineers are structured thinkers. Next slide. Yeah, we'll give 5 to 10 seconds for everyone for this trip. Yeah, while Calvin is not very good at solving problems, he's pretty smart at identifying them. Next slide. So I've seen engineers sometimes rely on intuition or some form of prior knowledge and apply them in a hit and trial fashion to solve it, which does not really work out very well. So structured thinking is a powerful tool to fight ambiguity and build clarity. And the interesting aspect of it is that it can be learned. And myself, I used to think not in a very structured fashion, but something I practiced over a period of time to improve it. Some of the steps that you can apply for structured thinking to build structured thinking is, start with building a deep understanding of the domain. Then define the outcomes to get a direction. Oftentimes, I've seen a problem statement without a clear outcome that someone wants to achieve. That does not help solve the problem in the right fashion. Create a framework, and it could be multiple frameworks as well, to be able to break down the problem and then continuously iterate. Sounds very easy, but it doesn't happen well enough until unless you apply intentionally. Let me share a very brief, very simple example. Let us say you are a senior engineer in a startup, and you have been given the problem statement to optimize your infrastructure cost. How do you sort of use these steps? The first step is to build domain understanding. What is the overall cost? What is the trend of the cost? What all products and services you have today which are being operated? What are the core infrastructure components that you use, for example, MongoDB, MySQL, etc. And what is the unit cost of them? So that's sort of the domain understanding. Then define outcomes to get a direction. Now, are you looking for a 10% optimization or 90% optimization? The approach could be extremely radical. Something like a 10% might be doable with some optimization. Something like 90% might require fundamentally killing off few features which does not make any sense. Then create a framework to sort of break down the problem. In this case, framework could be, break it down by services. If you have 20 services, what are those 20 services and what is the cost of each of the service and the trend against it? Other way of framing the problem could be, what are the various infrastructure components and what is the cost of that? There'll be sort of new insights that you may generate out of it. For example, it could be that here your network in and out is very costly. The second framework might give you that outcome. So that will give you a lot of visibility. And then you can, of course, break down and iterate further. So for example, if there's a particular service which is more costly, why is it costly? What are the features? Drill it down. But doing it sort of defining the structure and doing it in this form will help you solve it better and faster. And yeah, what I've seen is that writing down helps and doing it intentionally is very important, as I said earlier. At Hike, we value creativity a lot, and that's why we believe in building frameworks, applying structured thinking as a tool to unleash creativity. Next slide. Full stack engineer. Great engineers are full stack. Next slide. Yeah, I mean, an interesting stack. I would be seriously worried if anyone tried to become a full stack engineer on such a stack. Next slide. Yeah, so I share one observation. I was not directly involved in that project, but an observation that created this insight for me. I was involved in a project where it was sort of an e-commerce search domain. The whole idea was to build a new search page, and let's say you're searching books, it should show the books results as well as some of the attributes of those books. Facets is a technical term used. Could be books authors, could be few other things. And we launched that, and it sort of broke in production. Now the reason was, while we took note of the fact that a lot of books results we should paginate. It was not obvious that the number of authors in books would be huge as well. And that was a classic case of front end not knowing the back end limitation and back end not knowing the front end limitation. Front end team did not know that at back end the author data set is huge and the API is basically returning all the books. And they probably didn't care because the latency wasn't that high anyways. And the backend engineers knew the book authors data is huge, but they did not understand why it should be an issue because latency was again not an issue. The challenge was because we had a complex DOM structure and a lot of authors were being fetched and being rendered in a complex DOM structure, so that rendering will freeze for a few seconds. And that's not a great experience. That's as good as the browser crashing. So it's very important, therefore, to have a holistic understanding. Holistic understanding makes you a better engineer. Even if you are not building expertise in all the components of the full stack, it's very important to have at least a high level understanding so that you can collaborate better, understand problems of the other domain better, in essence, making you more effective. And when I talk about full stack, it is not just the technical stack. Of course, there would be front end, the web, the app, there is sort of back end, sort of different paradigms, distributed systems, sometimes even low level programming. But there's an aspect of full stack beyond that as well, which is product and business. In my view, full stack engineers are great product engineers as well, or vice versa. They are those people who understand the product really well. They understand the metrics, they understand the business context very well, which enables them to be a strong partner with product managers and therefore build great products, again, making them more effective via that. In my career, I've seen such engineers to have a massively higher impact than anyone else. So yeah, full stack goes beyond all aspects. And as I say sometimes, engineers are those who can understand business very well. The reverse is much harder. So all the more reason why engineers should be full stack. At Hike, we are essentially structured our teams to be full stack, which encourages us to sort of therefore solve problem holistically and think end to end, and just encourages a culture of bottom-up innovation. Hike has been a big patent filer for a long time because of some of these areas of focus. Okay. Next slide. Effective engineers are very pragmatic. Next slide. Yeah, I'll give 10 seconds for everyone to read it. I love this strip. Yeah. So Calvin is one of the most pragmatic kids I've ever seen. There was a project I was doing once, which had a dependency on another team, and the objective of the other team was to build an API, which my team will consume. We'll do some transformations on top of it to build an end-to-end feature. And we were on a monolith architecture. And the suggestion from the other engineer was that he will build it as a service, while my suggestion was just build a function with an API encapsulation on top of it. But the other engineer was very idealistic. He stressed on this fact. that we should build services. Now, in services are a great paradigm. Something, of course, I've used a lot. They help you scale better because you can isolate the services and sort of independently scale them. Services are greater to increase engineer productivity because again, you isolate code boundaries so well that multiple engineers can work effectively on different services. But those were not the problems that we were solving. We did not have those problems. We're a very small startup. The downside of building a service was that we had no clue of how to do retries, how to do timeouts. And if you don't do well, services fail and massively and miserably. And in this case, there was a transaction that would have crossed the boundaries of two services. So for sure, not the best way of doing it. And I've seen this often that engineers sometimes can be very idealistic as well. But I believe great engineers are, very pragmatic. Next slide. Yeah, so great engineers are able to think through the triad of speed, quality, and efficiency to take decisions that create great outcomes. So for example, if you're launching an MVP, which will have few customers and you don't even know if it will work or not, it's okay to do a hack. I don't mind that. But if you're launching, in fact, that's the right way of doing it because it probably is code which will not stay around for more than a month. But if you are launching a new feature on top of a product which is already used by millions of customers, which will have direct adoption of million users, and there's a high probability to scale up, has to be built at high quality, which can scale efficiently and smoothly, because otherwise it will break and create a bad customer experience. So therefore, it is very important to be context aware. And great engineers, effective engineers, are aware of the context of both tech and business so that they can make this right choices of speed versus quality versus efficiency. And it's very important that these decisions are intentional. For example, if you're building a hack and if you don't create an action item to track its fix, one day it will explode. So very important that these decisions are intentional and you create action items to track the side effects of those decisions. And by the way, there are different versions of hacks. There are always a more scalable version of the hack. So force yourself, your teams to think harder on that. So yeah, great engineers are pragmatic, and at Hike, therefore, we use the term velocity, not speed, because velocity is a sort of a combination of speed, quality, and efficiency. It's a vector. Speed is sort of a unit metric, same with quality and efficiency. So if you're moving at high velocity, that's what matters. And high velocity is achieved by pragmatic engineers. Next slide. Effective engineers are constant learner, or 10x engineers are constant learners. Next slide. Yeah, we'll hold on to this slide for 10 seconds. Yeah, Calvin hates learning for sure. Next slide. So software is a fast growing ecosystem. The tools, the frameworks, the problem dimensions continuously evolve. What works today will definitely not work tomorrow. So it's very important to continuously learn. How you do it, you find mentors to help you, your pursuit of constant learning. The key over here is to be intentional. If you're not intentional, it will not happen. Organize time to learn, something that I've done for a long while, not always consistently, but to a large extent. I sort of every weekend identify a topic for myself to learn explicitly as a goal. Some days I'll just probably cover the breadth of a particular topic. Some days probably I'll pick a granular topic and wade through its depth. But that learning has created immense value in my own growth. So I strongly believe in organizing time to learn. And don't limit your learning to books and blogs. Best way to learn is to learn from your peers and reviewing the code and design to understand the perspective, and then applying your own critical thinking on top of it is the best way of doing it. Not only makes you better, it makes your teams better as well. And your follow experts, they would generally be ahead of the curve and sort of keeps you in sync with the massive changes in technology all the time. So yeah, great engineers are constant learners. So yeah, over here, Calvin is looking forward to new exploration. And as a software engineer, the ecosystem extremely large. Techniques, frameworks, tools, platforms, business verticals continue to grow at rapid pace. And I strongly believe there couldn't be a better time to be a software engineer. So I wish you all the best in your exploration and to be a 10x engineer. Thank you very much for listening to me, and I'm happy to take questions now. Yeah, actually.
Yeah, Suresh. So we'll get right into it, right? We'll get right into the questions that we've received from the audience. The first question that we received was from a fellow from Cetus Information Technology, who asked you that what attracted you to the field of information technology?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, let me share an incident, and then a fancy answer, and then a real answer. How about that? So it's I probably was in 11th standard or 12th standard. I was in coaching classes. We all go to coaching classes, and I was carrying the Vidya Mandir classes bag. People who from NCR region probably would know what are Vidya Mandir classes. They are famous coaching classes. So that person sort of asked me, why Vidya Mandir. So I said, I'm trying to be an engineer, hopefully IIT. And the follow-up question was, which IIT? If you don't get in, which badge? And I said computer science, obviously. And the follow-up question was, if you don't get computer science in a top college, what will you do? My response was, I will drop out of that college because I wanted computer science. So, I had already made up my mind to become a software engineer. The fancy reason is that sort of I found it very attractive, because some of the fundamentals were similar to maths. I love maths, and therefore computer sort of came easy to me. And loved programming, started doing a bit of programming in my 6th, 7th standard itself. So all of that made a lot of sense for me. But I'll share the real reason. The real reason was I was extremely poor at writing. I hated writing. For the love of God, I couldn't write a good, neat page. So I will always get less marks because of my writing. And so I decided that software engineer is the best route for me because I won't have to write anything. So yeah, that's my answer.
Yeah, great, Suresh. So the next question we have is from a software engineer from Oak North Bank. And the question is how to stay relevant with the ever-changing tech landscape while you're still working for a company with an old technology stack?
Yeah, I think great question, because constant learning is absolutely important, as we discussed. I think if the ecosystem in your organization is not supportive of new learning, there's still ways out. Obviously, you can follow experts, you can read blogs, you can do sort of reading which helps you. But you can also reach out to your peers, which might be outside of your current organization context, discussing with them, because theoretical reading gets you only as far as it can. But talking to people who have sort of seen the challenges of a different paradigm, I think will help you sort of learn even better. So reaching out to peers outside of your particular organization would be very helpful. And then, it doesn't hurt to do a side project. If your organization is really in an old stack, why not do a side project so that you are continuously in touch with, what's with the latest technology. And I will go a step further. I would, depends on whether possible or not, but I would even sort of internally look at, while you cannot completely shift a stack on which your product is built, there are always opportunities that a certain incremental item or a sort of a new feature or a new sort of MVP that's being tried out to be built into a newer stack. And you can, and if you have learned the new stack, you can effectively sell it to your management that the new stack will provide you such and such an ROI. So focus on figuring out how you can sell sort of the new stack internally as well to transform not just your own career and your own learning, but your organization as well.
Great, Suresh. So this is one question that I've heard a lot, and it's a very interesting one. So every online course provider these days advertises a lot about machine learning and artificial intelligence courses. You see it everywhere, right? So in the future, will these be mandatory skills? This is a question from a software engineer from Automation Anywhere.
Yeah. So machine learning and AI is already sort of has become very prevalent, and that will continue to grow. So there's no stopping to that. I do believe machine learning and AI will be part of every sort of quote unquote engineering sort of setup. That does not necessarily imply that everyone has to be aware of all these sort of deep data science algorithms as well, because abstractions will be built out as well. For example, nobody needs to today know the assembly language programming because they're effective abstractions, right? So abstractions of AI and machine learning will continue to get smarter and become better as well. So I won't say that it will become mandatory that everyone should know the depth of machine learning. But as I discussed in the full stack engineer concept, it's very important to understand conceptually at a high level everything in a way. And from that perspective, high level understanding of machine learning, in my view, should be a mandatory skill that everyone should adopt. Depth of it, depends on your specific job, not mandatory for everyone.
Great. So the next question we have from a fellow attendee from Impressico Business Solutions. According to you, Suresh, what makes a resume stand out?
Sure. Few things. One, I think, one bit which I did not cover about effective engineers is also the communication aspect. I think effective engineers are also great communicators because you have to, build, design, and then effectively communicate that as well. And think of resume in the same fashion. You should effectively communicate via resume. And to effectively communicate, resumes should be short, should not be lengthy. When I built my first resume, I remember I built a 6-page resume. And I was very proud that I have done so much in my career. But that was not effective. Then I iterated until I got it down to 1.5 page. 1 page even better, but 1.5, 2 page should be okay. So I think the length is very important because then you can accurately convey what you want, very quickly. Identify the things that you want to highlight and do highlight them. Don't let it be a monotonous text font, etc. And very important to highlight outcomes. It is not good enough to say that you build such and such system because that does not convey the complexity. So talk about specific metrics that convey the complexities. For example, you built a new system ABC which scaled to whatever 10-20 million users. That 10 million, 20 million users automatically conveys the complexity because frankly, building an e-commerce system for 10 users is like 10-day job, while building it for billion users is like 10 years job, right? So convey the outcomes that you achieved as well. I think if you do these 3-4 things, there's a higher probability that your resumes will get noticed.
Wonderful. So another question by fellow attendee from ABC Tech Group. What is the scope of blockchain technology in India?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, blockchain is another technology which I actually believe will surpass AI as well in terms of its influence and impact towards society. Just generally speaking about blockchain, the mental model to think about blockchain, which is not very well understood, is blockchain is a computational platform for trust, and there is no other alternative in the world. Today, all the transactions that happen, every transaction that happens requires a trust ecosystem, and today it happens based on trust that is built by relationships or by authority, etc. So blockchain provides this wonderful mechanics to build this trust computationally. So I'll not go into the depth of it, but therefore the impact to the society will be huge. I think world over there will be huge opportunities. A lot of work is happening in blockchain. New startups springing up all the time, so that will continue to grow. When you ask specifically in terms of India, but of course the regulatory frameworks will continue to evolve. That's evolving across the world as well. So that's something to be seen. But I'm pretty sure not just in India, the world over, the influence and impact of blockchain will be huge, and that's not just related to currency. It's just anything and everything that we do.
Great. So this is because we have a lot of 4th year and 3rd year college students with us right now in the webinar. So this is one question that I like. What is the one piece of advice that you'd like to give these final year students and 3rd year students?
One piece of advice. Yeah, I mean, depends on the outcome that you want to achieve, right? What I would say, I think the context, of course, is from an engineering perspective, career perspective, right? If you're a 3rd or 4th year student, I would say make learning a constant, find some time to learn constantly and make it intentional and explore things, of course, beyond your curriculum. That goes without saying. The software industry is way advanced than most of the things that we study in our colleges, and what we study in college is extremely important, but I would definitely encourage you to find opportunities to expand it. A great way to do that is internship, by the way. A lot of startups in India, even larger organizations in India, are hiring interns all the time. Figure out if you can find opportunities of internship, because that will give you the exposure of working in a real company and sort of just manifold increase your learning. So I would say also think of if you can get internship opportunities in a fast growing startup.
Great. So I also see another question right now, and this makes a lot of sense because most of us are stuck at home. We're working from home, and it leaves us with a lot of extra time. So a fellow asks us that what is that one technology that we should actually invest our time on after working, obviously, our 9-to-5 jobs that will keep us challenged, and which has, which will actually open, a lot of opportunities for these engineering graduates in the future. What is that one technology that we should be, picking our brains out with?
Sure. I think there are of course so many technologies out there, right, which will become big in future. Machine learning, as you spoke about, is already very prevalent. I think a high level understanding of machine learning is very, very important. I'm pretty sure blockchain will become huge as well. And then there are sort of new paradigms of building software, distributed systems. If I have to pick one, if you just want to pick one, then I would say pick distributed systems and understand it well. The reason I say that is because distributed systems is is the reality of life. Anything we do at any sort of non-trivial scale today requires distributed system, and that's not just because of scale, but because of different paradigms as well. If you are working on a VR system, your VR AR goggles are effectively distributed from your backend system, right? So understanding the paradigms of distributed system is very important. So if you have to pick one, I would say pick distributed systems if you don't know that. But generally, I would encourage a broader learning mechanics, which is understand high level of machine learning, understand high level blockchain, understand high level of where VR, AR is going. I think that sort of high level understanding, even if you don't go in depth, help you sort of stitch um, your own problems that you're solving in your organization or outside of it in a unique way, and helps you become much more effective. So yeah, pick distributed systems if one, but I would encourage you to go broad and do high level of multiple things.
Great, wonderful. Also, this is actually an addition to the last question only. So, because we have a lot of time in our hands and a lot of free time, a lot of people are asking some really great new generation technology books and blogs that they can. Because anyway, I think before an engineering exam, nobody opens up books. They watch videos and they read a lot of blogs. That actually helps a lot. Books are very monotonous, they're very lengthy, but still, one book that you think really helped you, and something that you still have, you still refer to sometimes, you still open and read whenever you're free, and one blog if there's a blog that you read.
Sure. Yeah, great question. So my favorite technical book is of all time is I have a lot, but the one which probably would be most useful to the audience here is Effective Java. Joshua Bloch, if I remember correctly, he wrote Effective Java. So I remember in my first job, and it was a very lucky incident. My first job, my manager told me buy a couple of books. Which books you want to buy? I just went and searched Google, and Effective Java came as one of the books. It was just recently launched at that point of time, and I bought it. And Effective Java was an amazing book. It really goes into details of how to build great software using Java, talking about various patterns and anti-patterns, specifically from a Java perspective. And I was coding in Java, and it made me much more effective than I was. Helped me unlock a lot of new learnings. I built great APIs using that. And by the way, that's one book which, even if you're not on Java, gives you a lot of great advice. So Effective Java is one of my favorite books. I don't know if I refer it often now because don't get a lot of time to code myself. But I recently was discussing with one engineer, and we did discuss one pattern from Effective Java. So yeah, it's true. I do refer it sometimes. One blog. So my favorite blog is Stratechery. Stratechery.com, STRATECHERY.com. The author is an amazing guy. This is a blog which sort of combines. Stratechery originates from strategy and tech, and the author over here talks about the strategy of technology businesses, and the concepts which he talks about are very revealing, and he really sort of fundamentally breaks down as to why technology businesses are the way they are, and why they are so powerful and sort of in solving the customer problems, and therefore great business drivers. So Stratechery is my favorite. It is. I would share it with a caveat that it is definitely a bit heavy for first timers, but it gives more than it is very effective in your growth as a sort of technocrat.
Great. So this is actually in reference to the slides that we covered a few minutes ago. This question says, what is a full stack developer in your opinion, in very simple terms, in layman terms? And can a core movability developer become a full stack developer?
Sure. So, full stack developer, of course, in certain terms of standard industry definition, is somebody who can do both front and back end, right? That is the standard industry definition. I do personally do extend that a bit further, wherein I add the product engineering dimension as well, where I believe that the product and business understanding just creates you a more holistic engineer. But to answer the question, can a mobility developer become backend developer? Absolutely yes. I've seen it happening. I've seen app engineers become effective backend engineers. There was one guy in my previous organization who was an Android developer. He became a backend developer because he wanted to expand his expertise and then was contributing full stack. He even sort of later on moved on to some larger organizations and became a dedicated backend engineer in those organizations. So therefore his learnings were sort of deep. So I absolutely believe it is possible. The way to do it is sort of get started by building sort of small modules on the backend so that you can start learning the patterns. Patterns, of course, are different. There are different constraints, but the key point is problem solving mechanics are same. So it's not impossible to learn.
Great. I believe, Suvesh, it's close to 5 and we'll have to come to an end with this session. So do you have any closing comments while we're winding this up?
Yeah, no, I mean, again, I want to thank a lot. Thanks a lot to you, Vibhor. Thanks to Iris for inviting me for this talk. I mean, I love to talk about these things, because they are just so close to my heart. So I really love this opportunity to speak to people. I hope everyone here gained something out of it. And yeah, thanks a lot for this amazing 1 hour.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Suvesh. Thanks a lot. And with that, we bring to an end of an hour of wonderful insights and experiences, guys. Thank you so much, Suvesh and Hike, for this collaboration with us. Once again, guys, we hope you and your families and friends all stay safe. You continue to take all the necessary precautions in these pandemic times. Have a very, very great weekend, guys. Keep coding. Have fun. See you next time. Thank you so much.